Hi, I'm Cassie, and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make Japanese gyoza wrappers. Gyoza are a type of Japanese dumpling that originally came from China, but apparently one of the main differences between the two is that Japanese gyoza are a bit softer. Normally, Japanese gyoza recipes would call for half weak flour and half strong flour, but when I saw that I didn't know immediately what that was, and it turns out that weak flour is cake flour and strong flour is bread flour, and then we would have medium flour, which is all-purpose flour. Today I'm going to show you 3 different types of gyoza dough, one with just weak flour, one with just strong flour, and one with a mix. Each of these different types consists of flour, salt, and water, but they take on water very differently. So I hit a lot of bumps along the way in the making of this video, and I'm going to show you a few tips so that you can avoid that. In my next video, I'll be showing you how to make and cook the gyoza themselves, but today let's start from square one with the gyoza dough.
So first we'll need some weak or cake flour, some strong or bread flour, a pinch of salt, and some hot water. And that's it for what we need for the dough, but we will need some potato starch to go between each layer. So because we're making 3 batches, I'm just going to do 12 gyoza per batch. That means 100 grams of weak flour sifted into a bowl. Then we're going to add about half a teaspoon of salt and 50 milliliters of water. The weak flour takes on water the easiest, so we want to be careful not to add too much. Then we're going to mix it with a spatula until it forms a rough and shaggy mixture. Once you've got a mixture that roughly resembles this texture, then it's time to start bringing it together with your hands. This is very dry and we can see that it's not taking up all of the flour, so I'm just going to add a very small drop of water until it all comes together. Now we've got something that actually resembles dough. However, you can see that it's still pretty rough and it's not completely coming together in a smooth ball, but that's fine because we're going to be kneading it and leaving it to rest, which will make it a lot smoother later. So now we've got to knead our dough. Because this has a fairly dry exterior, I didn't feel the need to put any flour down in this particular case. So I'm just kneading it on the bare work surface. The way that I knead dough is to fold it in half and then press it down, then turn it round, fold it in half, press it down, and repeat. So after 10 minutes of kneading, we can see that it's already started to become a lot smoother. However, there are still some cracks. And if I drag my finger along it, then it creates a rough and bumpy texture. So now we're going to let it rest and let the gluten relax until it forms an even smoother ball of dough. I put this in beeswax wrap and I found that it worked really well, but you can also put it in cling film and leave it for at least 30 minutes at room temperature. Do not put it in the fridge because it will dry out and you won't be able to make any gyoza wrappers. So I'm not going to make you watch me do the exact same thing 3 times over, so let's watch this on high speed. But I will just tell you that the strong flour needed a bit more water, which in turn made it a little bit sticky, so I needed to flour the work surface. This means that it took on about 65 milliliters of water to 100 grams of strong flour. Then for the mixed version with 50 grams of each flour, it ended up taking on a total of 70 milliliters of water. Despite it being fairly sticky in the beginning, it slowly became apparent that it was quite dry.
So this one looks a little bit dry to me, but we're gonna wrap it up and see how it comes out in about 30 minutes. So it's taken me about an hour to do all 3 of those, which means that this one has been resting for an hour. Normally, any recipe that you'll find for gyoza dough will be about 200 grams of flour. But this time, because I'm making 3 of them, then I decided to just do half of the recipe. So this one ball will make us 12 gyoza. So let's unwrap it and see how it's done.
So after resting for an hour, it's much smoother. There are still some dents, but this is nothing to worry about. The dough should now be much more pliable and should slowly spring back when pressed. So now we're just going to roll it into a sort of log shape. We want to keep the diameter the same the whole way through, so just keep pressing the sides so that it doesn't taper off at the ends. The exact diameter doesn't matter as long as it's even the whole way through and you can cut it into 12 pieces. The easiest way to do this and keep it even is to cut it in half, then cut it in half again, and then cut those pieces into 3. If you've doubled the recipe, then I would recommend cutting it in half and setting one half aside in wrap whilst you work on these ones. They're definitely going to start sticking together if we just leave them like this, so we need to use a lot of potato starch the whole way through to make sure that they're always easy to separate. When you're working on one gyoza wrapper, then stop the rest of them drying out. You need to leave them in your wrap of choice.
If you've learned anything so far, then hit that thumbs up button and let's get rolling.
So now we're going to roll out the wrappers. I'm going to show you a few tips on how to make them as circular as possible. Tip number 1. Squish the center and leave the outer edges untouched. Then turn it round and squish the center again. Then start rolling. Tip number 2. Roll your gyoza wrapper from the outside in. Doing this means that the edges of your gyoza wrapper will be thinner and more easy to pleat. But the center of your wrapper, which will later form the base of the gyoza, will be nice and thick. Then I'm just doing the same thing for the rest of my wheat flour gyoza wrappers. Because these are made of wheat flour, then I'm making them a little bit thicker than the rest of them, so that they stay intact when cooked. Now we've got to do the same thing for our strong flour. So I'm just rolling it into a log and then cutting it up. I tried cutting it a little bit of a different way, but it didn't really work out for me, so I would recommend doing it the way that I did in the beginning. But if you find that you've got some funky dough that you don't know what to do with, don't give up. This one is a weird shape, and no matter how much I tried to fold it together, it just kept having this weird crevice. But here's how you deal with that. So just put it into as much of a ball shape as you can manage, and then get your rolling pin and just do the exact same thing as usual and squish it down in the middle. Then as you're turning it around, then use a bit more pressure than usual, but do it just nice and slowly. And just keep turning it until it becomes a nice circular shape. Everything should just come together and you'll just have another perfect gyoza wrapper. You can also use your fingers to stretch and thin the edges if you want. And my last very important tip is potato starch is your friend. Potato starch is essential when you're making gyoza wrappers. For one of my batches, I thought that I was using enough potato starch, but I really wasn't, and I left them for 30 minutes, and when I came back to them, they had all become one. They were this inextricably linked accordion, and I just couldn't make any wrappers out of them. So I ended up just like smushing it all together and making a weird kind of gyoza pizza out of it. So then I'm just doing the same for the final mixed dough. This one was weirdly the easiest to roll out into a log, but I did find that the edges dried out a little bit quicker than the other two. So let's see what they all look like side by side. And as a bit of a control for this experiment, I've also got some store-bought wrappers.
If you want to buy your own gyoza wrappers to compare, or you just don't have time to make these today, then check out the link in the description so you can buy them online.
So what do they feel like? The store-bought version is obviously preserved, so it's very dry and stiff. In comparison, the homemade versions are all very soft and pliable. When I was pleating them, then I found that the strong flour was the easiest one to pinch together. But when I was cooking, then the weak flour came up last because some of them ended up with a hole in them. In terms of taste, for the store-bought version, then it was very even, but the pleats were a little bit hard, which could maybe be rectified by steaming for a little bit longer. For the mix, it had a really nice crunchy base, and the pleats were nice and doughy and chewy. And this was honestly similar for the weak flour too, but with the strong flour, I was able to get a much thinner pleat. This was because the dough was a lot more bouncy and I was able to thin out the edges properly. So, who came out on top? It was the strong flour, Although the mix is the usual go-to recipe for gyoza dough, I found that I was able to get a thinner pleat while also keeping the doughy texture and the crisp base. So this is my favorite.
If you found any of these interesting or you're going to try them out yourself, then give me a like and subscribe to find out more Japanese recipes. See you next time!